I'm Bob Rodda, and I was director of Lowry Center and Student Activities for 22 years, retired 4 years ago.
Hello, and welcome back to another installment of Project 150, 150 stories for the 150th anniversary of the College of Wooster. My name is Sarah Torrio, and in today's episode, we have Bob Rodda, a retired staff who had a close relationship with many of the students on campus. Wooster holds a number of activities to do on campus. One in particular that Bob mentioned I had never heard before. It is a group known as BWF.
But students doing their project, the one I always come back to or pops into my mind first is a thing that was called Bisman Wrestling Federation, the BWF. It goes back to the heyday of worldwide wrestling, and there were a group of students, football players for the most part actually, or members of sections, who watched it every night. We opened the underground for them to watch it 3 times a week, etc. They developed their own wrestling federation. So all of a sudden we were having wrestling in Bisman, and they had figured this out. They'd gotten involved with this. Ultimately, they were filling the lounge to where it was at capacity. So we got in discussion with them and said, hey, we need to do some things. So we moved it with their cooperation, support, encouragement to the underground. And they choreographed the wrestling matches. We made sure the ring was safe. They rehearsed. They choreographed the movements. They scripted the whole thing. It was amazing. For 3 years, it was an event to go to. What are you doing this week? I don't know. Is BWF happening? If it is, then that's what you do. And they filled the underground. And these were football players who sometimes are heavily football players who you wouldn't think would get involved in extracurricular things, who came up with an idea that fascinated them. And let me tell you, for my colleagues, you wouldn't want as an institution to take on the liability for a wrestling federation, but the students were doing it. And we worked with security, worked with others to make sure it was safe, and they did the whole shtick. I was a groupie for one of the wrestlers. The wrestler was called the Professor. Obviously, that was an evil, bad professor, a fighter in that, and I was a librarian. And so one day I gave him a dictionary to whap his opponent in the mat. It was just ingenious. You roared in laughter. Lasted for about 3 years, so that generated that small little clip of students. Did that and had a great time. Another one that I remembered was a student who wanted to do a theater production. She had always wanted to produce this particular show, and unfortunately I don't remember the name of the show, but she created a student organization that's still here called Effie's Players, got some funding from campus council funds to do it as a new student organization, and put on the show in Shilroy, and took 2 or 3 nights of good crowd. Her idea, she made it into an organization to comply, pulled it off, it was delightful. The other one that's fun, I think, on my list is Let's Dance. So they go back 20 years, I think. And then after they graduated, it faded away. And then later in my time, it resurrected with a slightly different purpose. And now I think it's done it again. So I'm not sure the founders would necessarily totally recognize what it is today, but it's gone through 3 evolutions by the nature of students who changed and took their own dream and put their own work on what the group was.
Although Bob was part of the staff, he was also like a friend or a father to many of the students. One of the reasons why is because of his philosophy on students, his outlook, and his encouragement for students to have a voice on campus.
It doesn't matter what I want the outcome to be. It matters them to reach their goal. I came to realize a couple years ago, later than I should have, I guess, that some of the student activity stuff paralleled IS. Students in IS develop a project, work with a faculty member. Students in the extra curriculum develop an idea they want to pursue and work with the student activity staff to make it happen. I'm not sure that's a perfect analogy, but it certainly works for me, and I would argue it with folks who would disagree.
If anyone has visited the Scott Center, they may see a beam that students, faculty, and staff signed back when the Scott Center first opened. Bob Rodda was actually the person behind the signing, and he tells us that it was one of his biggest accomplishments while at Wooster.
One of my favorites that I took, couple that I took the lead on, one of them was Sign the Beam. When I learned that many schools or many buildings, when they were building, had people who were involved in it sign the last construction beam that might go in the top of the building or somewhere in the structure of the building. We decided to do that for the Scott Center. We made that decision late so that the beam is actually displayed publicly in the Scott Center in the southwest corner off the track. Bogner Construction donated a beam. We had it come out. They lifted it up over in the back patio of Lowry on a Friday afternoon of trustee meeting. Trustees, athletes, students, whoever gathered, signed the beam. And then we put it out for 2 days at the start of the next week in front of Lowry for anybody who wanted to sign the beam. The president's theme for that, President Cornwell's theme, was every student every day. Well, we tried to broaden it and say anybody connected with Wooster every day. So we had community members sign it. We had 2 women come back who I think were talking about getting ready to celebrate their 60th alumni reunion, and they signed it. The 7 or 8-year-old daughter of a staff member in development signed the beam. We even got a prospective student and her parents to come and sign the beam because they were part of the Worcester community at some level, and I don't know if she ever came, but they signed the beam. And I could take you over and show you where I've signed the beam. And I think everybody who was here at that time did that said, hey, we're invested and thankful this project's happening. It's important to us. And I like the notion it's displayed as opposed to hidden in the construction of the building. That was one. Another one I would talk about was we brought parts of the AIDS Memorial Quilt to campus 3 times. Nancy Anderson and the High and I were primary leaders of that. A project I've never seen. Every meeting we had new participants because somebody who hadn't been involved before got involved. Somebody else from the community came together. Somebody who was trying to remember a family member or a friend who had died got together to make a quilt. Or somebody on campus hadn't heard about it and got involved or had a connection. So I don't know that we could even compile the number of people, but we did the first one in McGaw, limited show, and then we did 2 in the PEC gym. We had quilts hanging from the rafters. We had quilts displayed on the bleachers that were open and quilts on the floor. And the last 2 times, I guess, we did it, we also brought back the quilt that was a patchwork of the ones we had donated the first time we displayed the quilt. And the community was incredibly responsive. Somebody commented, a conservative community was very responsible to an issue that necessarily wouldn't be conservative when the quilt was here. It was quite fascinating, and that came to say the quilts you tell the story of a person. So you see a baseball mitt, you see a Worcester banner, you see whatever, and they were displayed to reflect the life and values and interests of that person. Neat thing.
This episode was written, produced, and edited by Ronnie Wright, Samuel Carlson, and myself. Special thanks to Brent Woodard, Richard Figge, and Bob Rodda. All music used is from audioblocks.com. This project is supported and sponsored by the College of Wooster. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time.